When love fades like a quiet stream, sometimes loss does not arrive with noise. It slips in, like water seeping into dry earth, unnoticed at first. One day, you simply realize something you once held dear has already let go of you. Not with a fight, not with a final word, just absence, wearing the face of everyday life. There was once a traveler who carried the memory of love like a flame cupped between his hands. Through storms, through still nights, he kept it burning. But the winds changed. The person walking beside him began to speak less, smile less. Their laughter, once a melody, now scattered like dry leaves against cold stone. One evening, the traveler paused by a quiet stream. The water, once rushing with spring's hunger, now moved slowly, tired and thin. He scooped a handful, but the water slipped through his fingers, impossible to hold. He sat back, staring at his empty palms, feeling the silence fill his chest. Some things, he realized, cannot be kept by clinging. Some things must be allowed to pass, like water returning to the sea. The flowers by the river had begun to wilt, bending their tired heads to the ground. The traveler watched them, not with sorrow, but with a kind of tender respect. Even beauty must bow to time. Even love, once vivid and fierce, must sometimes be let go. The wind touched his face, cool and soft. The traveler closed his eyes and breathed it in. Letting go was not an act of defeat. It was a quiet honoring of everything that had been. And so, in that stillness, he understood. When love begins to fade, it asks not for resistance, but for grace. Now, let's walk deeper into the story of the wanderer and the sage and see how, through the quiet gestures of nature, life teaches us when it is time to let go. 1. The quiet distance. There are seasons in the heart when something once bright begins to dim. Not with a loud goodbye, not with anger, but with a soft, slow drifting away, like a river pulling from the shore. Once, there was a young man who loved to sit by the old willow tree near his home. Each afternoon, he would lean against its sturdy trunk, feeling the sun scatter gold across his face, hearing the river whisper stories only the patient could hear. The willow was always there, and he believed it always would be. One day, without warning, he noticed the leaves had lost their shimmer. They drooped under the weight of summer's heat. The green faded into a tired gray. He reached out to touch a branch, but it slipped through his fingers, brushing his skin like a memory already turning distant. He stood still, hand outstretched, feeling the hollow space where connection used to be. In that silence, he realized love, too, changes this way. It doesn't break, it doesn't shout, it simply grows quieter, like a song you almost remember, but can't quite hum anymore. The river kept flowing, patient and slow. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen petals. He watched the water curve gently round stones, finding new paths without hesitation. No anger, no sorrow, only the grace of movement. He thought of the person he used to share his dreams with, how their laughter once filled his days like spring rain. How lately, conversations felt thinner, like paper left out in the sun. Not wrong, not cruel, just thinner. He could not say when it started. Perhaps it was the long silences during dinner, or the way their eyes wandered past his without settling. Small things, tiny, almost invisible things, but real, like the first chill of autumn creeping into summer's last evening. The young man picked up a fallen willow leaf. It crumbled softly in his palm, leaving only a faint trace of green dust. He smiled, not out of happiness, but with the quiet understanding that not all things are meant to last untouched. There was no need for blame, no need for anger or regret. The river flowed. The willow shed its leaves. He, too, would learn to let go. He stood by the river a long time, watching the water slip away, watching it return over and over. It did not fight the stones in its path. It curved, it yielded, and still, it kept moving forward. Some kinds of love are like this, he thought. They bless us in their time, and when their time ends, they teach us how to bless the parting, too. Sensing this quiet fading, the wanderer set out on a journey to understand what the heart already knew. 2. The road to the mountain. There are moments when the heart grows heavy with questions it cannot answer. A slow ache settles in, quiet but persistent, like the first hint of winter in the autumn air. Something once certain has shifted, and though everything looks the same, nothing feels the same anymore. There was once a wanderer who carried these questions in his chest like stones. Once, he had walked with joy, each step light, each breath full. But lately, the world seemed different, heavier, muted. The people he loved seemed distant, not in miles, but in the invisible space that silence brings. One morning, he set out toward the mountains, hoping that somewhere in the stillness he might find an answer. The path was steep and winding. The trees grew thinner. The river he followed became a thread of silver running low over smooth rocks. He stopped at the riverbank and dipped his hand into the water. It slipped through his fingers without resistance, cool and fleeting. For a moment, he tried to catch it, closing his palm tightly. But when he opened his hand again, there was nothing left but dampness and empty air. The wanderer sat on the ground, staring at his empty hand. It struck him then some things are meant to touch us only in passing. To try and hold them too tightly is to lose them faster. Grief rises not because the water leaves, but because we forget it was never ours to keep. As he climbed higher, the wind picked up. It whispered through the bare branches, tugged at his cloak, pressed against his face. Not harshly, not cruelly, just a steady reminder that movement is part of all things. That even the strongest roots must eventually loosen their grip on the soil. Near the summit, he found a clearing where wildflowers once grew. Now, only the brittle stems remained, bowing low to the earth. He knelt and ran his fingers over the dry petals, so fragile they crumbled at his touch. Still, the memory of their color lived in the air, faint, but undeniable. Some beauty, he thought, is meant to be carried not in the hand, but in the heart. Above him, the sky stretched vast and clear, endless in its openness. The wind moved without walls to stop it, free to go wherever it wished. He realized then that love, too, must be like the wind. It cannot be caged without losing its spirit. It cannot be demanded without losing its kindness. The mountain did not give him the answers he sought. Instead, it gave him silence, and in that silence, he heard the only truth he needed. To love is to be grateful. To lose is not failure. To let go is sometimes the purest way to honor what was real. In his search, the wanderer discovered that the first sign of lost love is not in grand gestures, but in the gentle pulling away of presence. 3. When presence begins to fade, there is a kind of sadness that comes not from loud goodbyes, but from quiet distance. A slow slipping away, so gentle you almost miss it, until one day you feel it like a coldness where warmth used to live. There was once a man who visited the same pond each morning. He loved the way the light danced on the surface, the soft hum of life around him. The water was always there, meeting him with open arms. It felt certain, unchanging. But one morning, he noticed something different. The surface was still, too still. No ripples reached for the shore. No breeze stirred the reeds. He tossed a small stone into the pond, expecting the familiar widening circles. But the water swallowed the stone without a sound. No rings, no movement, only silence, heavy and unmoving. He sat by the pond, staring at the place where the stone had disappeared. A quiet fear grew inside him, the kind that speaks without words. When connection fades, it does not announce itself. It simply stops answering. He remembered a friend who used to greet him with easy laughter. How lately their words had grown shorter, smiles more hesitant. The long walks once filled with stories now passed in silence. Not angry silence, not wounded silence, just absence, wearing the skin of routine. The man dipped his hand into the pond. The water was colder than he remembered, distant even as it touched his skin. He watched as drops slip from his fingers, falling back into stillness without a sound. You can be near something, he thought, and still be miles away. A heron stood at the far edge of the pond, unmoving, its reflection barely a whisper on the water. The man watched it for a long time, wondering if it waited for something, or if it simply stood because standing was all that was left. He realized then love does not always vanish in storms. Sometimes it vanishes like the light fades at dusk, slowly, so tenderly that you don't notice until you are sitting alone in the dark. The breeze stirred, lifting a few fallen leaves across the water. They floated for a moment, then drifted apart, each carried by its own small current. The man watched them go, feeling the soft ache of inevitability. Nothing could force the leaves back together. Nothing could summon back the ripples once they were gone. He closed his eyes, letting the cool air fill his lungs. There's no blame in this, he thought. No failure. Only the quiet truth that presence, like all living things, changes. And sometimes, the greatest kindness we can offer is to notice when it has begun to fade. Yet even small distances can be seen, if we know where to look in the spaces where connection used to live. 4. The language of small silences. There's a quiet kind of sorrow that does not shout. It creeps in softly, folding itself into the smallest spaces. A missed glance, a longer pause between words, a laugh that feels a little too rehearsed. There was once a woman who kept a garden behind her cottage. Every morning, she would walk among the flowers, touching their petals lightly, whispering to them as if they could understand. The blooms seemed to nod in return, bright and eager beneath her care. One spring, she noticed something different. The roses that had once burst open with fierce color now opened more slowly. Their petals looked thinner, paler. She brushed her fingers across them. They trembled slightly, as if carrying a fatigue too deep for words. She knelt by the soil, searching for signs. There was no sudden sickness, no harsh storm, only a slow drying of the earth. A thirst that had been too gentle to see until it was already there. Her heart tightened, not with anger, but with a deep, aching tenderness. Sometimes, loss is not a collapse, but a quiet drifting away. By the time you notice it, it has already begun. She rose to her feet, watching the garden breathe in the soft morning light. The bees still hovered, the wind still stirred the leaves, but everything moved a little slower, held a little less promise. In her friendships too, she realized, there had been gardens left untended. Conversations once full of warmth now stumbled into polite exchanges. The embraces were still there, but lighter, more formal, like touching a memory rather than a person. The laughter echoed, but lacked its old weight. It was not betrayal. It was not cruelty. It was simply the way seasons shift without asking permission. One moment it is summer, and the next you find yourself reaching for a jacket against an unfamiliar chill. The woman touched a mirror she kept by the back door. The reflection staring back at her was the same, and yet, not quite. There was a softness around the edges, a quiet tiredness that had not been there before. In trying to hold on to what had already changed, she had worn herself thin without knowing. The garden would need water, yes, but it would also need acceptance that some flowers would not return, that some colors would only live in memory. To love something, she thought, is to notice when it begins to ask for a different kind of care, or sometimes simply to notice when it asks for release. The breeze lifted a fallen petal from the path, carrying it away without effort. She watched it float, watched it find its own way beyond the garden walls. Not everything that drifts away must be chased. Not everything that fades must be mourned. Some things must simply be witnessed with open eyes, with an open heart. And when distance settles in, the gaze itself changes, revealing a second, deeper truth about love's fading. 5. The mirror in the wind. There is a strange ache in realizing that someone you love no longer sees you the same way. Not because they have spoken it, not because they have walked away, but because something unspoken has already shifted in the space between you. There was once a boy who kept an old mirror by his window. Each morning, the sun would rise, and the mirror would catch the light, throwing it across the room like handfuls of gold. He loved to sit there, watching the warm glow dance on the walls. It made the small room feel endless alive. One morning, he noticed the light was different, dimmer, colder. The mirror, once so quick to catch the sun, now reflected only a pale, tired gleam. He moved closer, wiping the glass with his sleeve, thinking perhaps it was dust, or the breath of night still clinging. But no matter how carefully he wiped, the reflection stayed muted, distant. It was not the glass that had changed. It was the light. Or maybe it was him. He sat back, staring at his own face framed inside the dull mirror. The features were the same eyes, the same mouth, yet somehow they seemed farther away, as if he were looking not at himself, but at a memory of who he used to be. Outside, the wind stirred the dry branches of a bare tree. The leaves were long gone, scattered by colder days. The tree stood where it always had, yet it seemed lonelier now, stripped of the colors that once made it beloved. He thought of the way certain voices had started sounding different, how familiar laughter now seemed just a little forced, how glances once full of warmth now skimmed past him like a stone skipping water. No harshness, no cruelty, just a quiet slipping into unfamiliarity. He pressed his palm to the glass. It was cool, almost indifferent beneath his skin, and he understood when someone's heart changes. It is not just their words that change, but their eyes, their energy, the way they occupy space beside you. The wind picked up, rattling the windows lightly. The boy listened, not with fear, but with a kind of soft acceptance. Everything moves, everything shifts, even faces, even voices, even the spaces between people. The mirror, the light, the wind, the empty tree, all of them spoke the same quiet truth. When someone no longer sees you the way they once did, no amount of holding tighter can bring them back. Closeness is not something you can force into existence. It is either there, breathing gently between you, or it is not. He turned from the mirror, leaving it to catch what light it could. Outside, the sky stretched wide and pale, the wind humming its endless song. And somewhere within him, the boy understood. Some reflections fade not because we are less, but because all things, even the dearest things, must sometimes move with the changing light. Facing this shift, the wanderer learned that clinging only deepens sorrow, while letting go opens the heart to peace. 6. The art of letting the river flow. There is a sorrow deeper than anger, quieter than grief. It is the sorrow of trying to hold what no longer wishes to stay, of cupping your hands around water, only to watch it slip through the cracks. There was once an old man who lived near a river. Each morning, he would walk to its edge, kneel, and scoop handfuls of the clear water into a clay bowl. He loved to watch it shimmer under the rising sun, loved the cool weight of it resting in his palms. But one summer, the river began to run lower. The rains did not come as they once did. The currents thinned to threads, winding slowly between the stones. Still, the man returned each day, trying to gather what he could. He dipped his bowl into the shallows, lifting it carefully, but the water would not stay. It trickled through the fine cracks in the clay, leaving his hands damp and empty. At first, he grew frustrated. He patched the bowl, tried again. He pressed harder, moved faster, desperate to save even a little of what was slipping away. But the more he grasped, the faster the water fled. One morning, exhausted, he simply sat by the river's edge. He watched it move slow, patient, unbothered by his sorrow. It wound its way past stones, past roots, past all the things that had once tried to hold it. He placed the broken bowl beside him. He dipped his hands in without trying to catch anything, just feeling the coolness, the gentle pressure of the current against his skin. And for the first time, he understood the river was never his to hold. It was only his to touch, to feel, to honor while it passed. The trees along the riverbank swayed in a soft wind. Their leaves rustled, light as whispers. Some leaves let go, spinning gently to the ground. No struggle, no regret, only the natural, quiet surrender to the turning of the season. The man closed his eyes and listened to the sound of the flowing water. It was the same river he had loved, even if it had changed. It had always been moving, always slipping forward into something new. In love, he thought, we make the same mistake. We believe that if we hold tighter, if we work harder, we can keep the feeling forever. But love, like water, like seasons, like breath, must be free to move. When it stays because it chooses to. When it leaves, no wall, no plea, no broken heart can chain it back. He opened his eyes and smiled, a small, tired smile. The river was still there, not in his bowl, not in his hands, but around him, within him, always passing, always present in its own way. Sometimes letting go is not a failure. Sometimes it is the purest form of love we can offer. Through surrender, he found not loss, but a path away to walk lighter, freer, into what life still had to offer. 7. The path beyond the mountain. There comes a moment when the heart, tired from holding on, simply lets itself breathe, not from defeat, not from bitterness, but from a deep place that finally understands it is time to walk forward. There was once a wanderer who climbed a high mountain to find answers. He carried the weight of absence on his back, the ache of questions that had no clear shape. For a long time, he believed that if he could only hold tighter, try harder, he could mend what was slipping away. At the mountain's peak, he found no answers written in stone, only the wind, cool against his skin, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Only the wide sky, endless and pale, offering no promises, no explanations. He sat down on a smooth rock, feeling the strength of it beneath him. In his hands, he turned over a small, cracked mirror, the one he had carried for years without noticing how much it had changed. The reflection staring back at him was familiar, but not the same. A little older, a little quieter, and somehow a little freer. The wind moved through the grass at his feet. Each blade bent and rose again, supple, unbroken. He thought of the times he had tried to be the stone, immovable, stubborn, refusing change. And he realized that real strength was not in holding, but in yielding, in bending without breaking. Far below, the river shimmered, winding its way through the valley. From where he sat, it looked almost still, but he knew the water was always moving, always reshaping itself around the rocks. It could not move. It did not fight the land. It did not mourn the stones. It simply found a way forward. The wanderer closed his eyes and breathed. In the deep quiet, he could hear the sound of his own heart, steady, alive, still capable of loving, even after all the leaving. He stood up, leaving the cracked mirror resting on the stone. It would stay behind, like all the things he no longer needed to carry. The mountain would keep it, or the wind would scatter it, and he would not look back. The path down the mountain was long, but it no longer felt heavy. Each step was a choice, a quiet acceptance of what had been and what could still be. Not clinging to the past, not chasing after what had gone, only walking with open hands, with an open heart. The trees whispered as he passed, shedding golden leaves like blessings. The river sang below, carrying away what must be carried. And somewhere deep inside, the wanderer smiled, knowing that beginnings often wear the soft skin of endings. Some journeys do not end where you thought they would. Some loves do not stay where you hoped they might. But life, like the river, like the wind, like the heart, always finds a way to move forward. In the end, every letting go is a beginning, and every ending, a quiet invitation to grow. The quiet grace of moving on. There are moments when the heart tightens, wishing to hold on to what is already slipping away. The harder we cling, the more it seems to dissolve between our fingers, like mist rising off a river at dawn. Once, an old woman tended a candle in her small cabin through a long winter. Each night, she shielded it from the cold drafts, cupped her hands around its fragile flame. But even the gentlest care could not stop the wax from melting, the wick from growing shorter. One evening, she realized the candle was almost gone. She sat before it, no longer trying to shield it, simply watching as the last flickers of light danced across the walls. There was no panic, only a deep, quiet respect for what had been. When the flame finally faded, she did not rush to light another. She sat in the darkness, feeling the warmth it had left behind still lingering in the room, still alive in memory. Life is like this. Love is like this. Not everything is meant to stay. Not every flame is meant to burn forever. Some things come to teach us joy. Some things come to teach us how to let go. Both are gifts, though they wear different faces. In the stillness, the woman smiled, knowing endings are not failures. They are invitations to grow, to honor what was beautiful without needing to hold it captive, to trust that, even in the quiet after the flame, the heart can find new ways to shine.